Welcome to this episode of Another Man's Shoes. We're delighted to be joined by David O'Neill MBE. David's currently the Deputy Assistant Commissioner of the London Fire Brigade, and he's going to talk to us about his time as a young Tom in the Parachute Regiment, through to leaving and joining the fire service. Since joining the service, he's been integral in many incidents in the UK. He's trained with the Americans following September 2001, and also been part of the UK's response to natural disasters with the International Rescue Team. He's talked to us about a number of these different events, as well as the Grenfell Tower fire, which is obviously in many people's minds. It was a great interview, really enjoyed it. I hope you enjoy it too. So, David, over to you.
Yeah, hi Adam. Thanks for talking to me.
No worries. Well, no, I appreciate you reaching out, and obviously we know each other from other stuff we do through the charity and sort of mutual friends. And sort of speaking to you in the past, and sort of what I hear from others, you've done a lot of stuff in your time, and I think people that listen to this podcast be really interested, because it's not always the sort of military orientated podcast that we want to do. We like to hear about other people's journeys and the emergency services, and because we were talking to a chap the other day who's a fireman, and it just makes you realise the trauma and the things that you guys see on a daily basis for years and years of your career. Whereas in the military, we see some horrible things, but often it's for 6 months or a few months out in operations. You may not do anything again. So it really opened my eyes on obviously PTSD, and obviously I suppose the journey that you guys go through that's so different to what we have to. The way we usually run these shows is we'll talk to you, you'll give us a bit about your background, and then we'll go through the other parts. And so can you sort of take us through your upbringing and where you sort of started off life, and what was your childhood like?
Yeah, sure. So I was born in Hong Kong. My father was in the Royal Navy. I was 3 years old when I came to the UK. The first place I landed in the UK was Brize Norton, actually. So I ended up going back there a few years later. So we were living in Portsmouth, and actually, life was good. Then, we were growing up, me and myself and my brother. Then we had another brother come along, and the old man sort of gave it all up, really. He got a job. He was an engineer. So he got a job working in a factory, and then that company moved up towards London, and that brought us up sort of to South London. So grew up in South London, and normal upbringing. Went to a decent school. My brothers were a bit more brainy than me, but we all benefited from a good education, and that was it, really.
So what part of London was that you brought up in?
So, well, South London now, it's down, it's Wallington. So, the true Londoners will hate me for that. But then the people from Surrey will hate me as well for calling it Surrey. It was Surrey when we moved up here when I was a kid. But it's now become kind of South London, really. So
that was back in the 80s, I imagine, is it? Sort of the growing up time?
Yeah, 1980, that was. Yeah.
You seen a big difference if you sort of what the place is like today compared to back then?
Yeah, just everything, the traffic and everything. It was quite a quiet place, really. I think they thought it was the countryside when we first moved up here from Portsmouth. It was a little bit concrete, the Tricorn Centre and all of that stuff. And now, it's just become, London's just grown and grown. So, and I pretty much always worked in central London as well. So, I suppose we consider ourselves Londoners, really. But it's nice to be able to escape just out slightly every day.
Yeah, absolutely. When you finished school, did you know what you wanted to do as your career? Or did you sort of looked at your pathways?
Yeah, I was kind of army barmy, really, or military barmy, I suppose, all the way through school. I couldn't wait to leave school. I couldn't wait to join the army. Our cross-country races at the end of my fifth year at school, we were doing in webbing. Me and my mates were in the army cadets. We were doing it in webbing with weight in boots and lightweights. We were doing our school cross country and that to prepare ourselves. And I went down to the army careers at Norbury, and me and my mate, we signed up, and we did pretty well in the exams. I wanted to join the Parachute Regiment, and the careers officer down here had different ideas for us, really. I think he was a signaller, so of course he was championing his own cap badge. And I came away from there with my date to go to Sutton Coalfield, and we were that's it. We were joining the juniors, Came away full of myself, really. And then my old man had slightly different ideas, having been a junior himself, and I think having a bit of a tough time as a junior. There was no way he was going to sign me chit, really, to get us in. So he said, no, if you still want to do it when you're 17 and a half, I can't stop you. He said, but I'm not letting you go in as a 15-year-old. I was 15 when I left school. So he made me get a job. So I got a job, and I had money in my pocket. I was sort of living it up a bit, really. My mates were all apprentices. I had a decent job, and, I kind of turned my head a bit, I suppose. I still had this yearning to be in the military. And when I turned 17 and a half, I joined 10 Para, which was a local unit to us, to kind of, I suppose, get the best of both worlds at that point.
Okay, and I suppose reflecting back on it now, do you have any regrets of not joining up, or do you think that what your dad did by not sort of signing you up to go in was quite a wise decision?
I really do have regrets. When I was, obviously, I joined the Fire Brigade, and I suppose about 2 or 3 years into the Fire Brigade, I was enjoying it, but I still had this. So let me backtrack. Really, I was on a course with 1 Para, and I was still, determined this is what I want to be doing. And I was chatting to the lads from 1 Para, and morale was quite low in the battalion at that time, and they didn't go to the first Gulf War. It was kind of Northern Ireland or nothing. There was nothing else on the radar. And I had that debate with a few of the lads, and they were saying, look, if it was us, we'd already applied to join the Fire Brigade at that point. And they were saying, look, just do it. Join the Fire Brigade. You don't hang around here. This is shit. There's nothing happening. It's Northern Ireland or nothing. Join the Fire Brigade. What a great job. And I suppose they sort of talked me into it, really. And so that's obviously the way I went. And then a couple of years into the fire service, I still had this sort of dilemma, really, and I'd done the right thing, and I thought about joining the Marines even, and then, I still had this sort of this yearning, really. And of course, then 1 Para went on to be SFSG and went blooming everywhere, Yeah. So from going to nothing, they became the busiest battalion in the regiment. And so, of course, I was looking at that and people I stayed in touch with, and I'm just thinking, oh, what have I done here, But, so be it. I spoke to my old man about it, and I wish he'd let me go my way, I suppose. But I think he stands by his decision anyway. And, I've made the best of my job now, so I suppose I can't complain, really.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you've done well. So, because you joined the Fire Brigade, was it back in 93?
Yeah, I joined in late 93. September 93 I joined. And at the time, the London Fire Brigade was, a training centre was quite regimented. You had to march or run everywhere around the training centre. You had parades every morning. You were inspected in open order. Our instructor was pretty strict, and I thought, this is it. This is everything. I thought I've cracked it here, really, because this is kind of what I'm after, and then actually going into, joining a fire station, it was everything really that I was looking for. I had the action, I had the sort of the discipline, the camaraderie, and we kind of getting to go home every night as well. So I thought I'd landed on my feet, really.
Yeah, definitely. I suppose that's the big thing, isn't it? You finish your shift and you get to go home and you've had all the fun and excitement you could want for the day. But interesting, my dad was a copper and my mum, both of them sort of 30 odd years. And when I left the military, I thought, well, I'd like to join the Fire Brigade. But I think getting in the Fire Brigade is a particularly difficult process. It seems that they shift out a lot of people and only sort of 10% or whatever seem to make the cut. So then I thought, well, I'll join the police. And my mum was just like, do not join the police. Zero respect out on the streets. It's just not the job it used to be. You can't give people a clip around the ear, and the criminals have got more rights than we have. But then it sort of got me thinking, when you're sort of talking about the fire service and the camaraderie, how do members of the public, I suppose, associate with the Fire Brigade? Because generally, I think it's quite negative, the members of the public towards the police. But with the Fire Brigade, do you get a positive response when you turn up? Do you have many problems?
Yeah, no, not really. I've got to say, we're kind of, we're the only emergency service that's not wearing stab vests. I mean, that tells you something.
Yeah.
I don't think we're a million miles away from it, but it's, people thank us, so sometimes, their house is, destroyed. As disciplined and professional as firefighters are, we've kind of soaked everything, and they're still thanking us for it, So, luckily for us, we have got a great reputation, which kind of allows us to get into the community. We are trusted, and it allows us to go in and people feel safe with us. We're trying to make fire stations safe havens in the community. We always say to any members of the public, if they're out and they feel threatened, just go to the fire station. You've got a load of people there that, it's fully staffed any time, day or night in London. And you'll be safe, So I think we've benefited from that compared to the police. And, over the years, I've worked really closely with the police on a lot of the stuff I do. And, most of them aren't, kind of uniform coppers. But, yeah, I think we've been lucky, really. We've got a good reputation, and, we've got that discipline, but we don't get a lot of the aggro the police get.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose one of the things that I suppose in the military, you kind of get dropped in a situation and you don't get much training before you go to, I suppose, when I was in, it was like Bosnia, Kosovo, Ireland, Afghan, Iraq. And I suppose towards the latter part, there was more training put in place, to deal with, I suppose, some of the situations you face and seeing the bombs and the damage and, obviously the human toll. But in the fire brigade, do they deal with that quite early on? Because on an almost daily basis, you're going to see some horrendous things. Is there much sort of training and coping sort of support for that?
Well, there wasn't, and it's actually got less over time, and this is something I feel quite strongly about. I did my own preparation, knowing what I was going into with my eyes wide open, really. I actually, I made some arrangements to go and see some post-mortems, just as, for my own preparation. And this was kind of through a friend of a friend. And, he had a couple of post-mortems lined up for me, pretty straightforward, elderly people that had died. And then he had the special one waiting for me. He had a drug dealer that had been dead for 3 weeks before they found him. And this bloke had... He was kind of topless, but he had his sort of jeans on, and his body was completely bloated and dark green. And, the maggots had got into his head and all of this stuff. And they popped this bloke, and the smell that came out of this bloke, it just, I was yakking straight away, They're all laughing at me saying, you don't see this on London's Burning. They sort of cut his head open, to get to his brain, and it was full of maggots and stuff. And I thought, God, I'll throw myself in a deep end here. But it was kind of my personal preparation, really, because, for my own sanity, really, I knew what I was going into. I hadn't been exposed to anything like that. So I thought, well, I'm not going to get caught out. I want to do what I can to prepare myself, because I know what's coming.
Yeah, I think that's quite important, isn't it? I suppose that probably says quite a lot about yourself and your personal admin there, that you haven't just relied on others to give you the experience. You've gone out and sort of sought out some sort of extracurricular activities, albeit with dead people in morgues. That's probably the para bit coming out of you still. But so your first experience, when obviously your first shout, I think everyone remembers that first time, wherever it is in their job. And what was yours?
So I think the first one that I think, that kind of stays with me, really. And I suppose this was a bit of a signpost, actually, to some of the stuff that, I want to talk about. We got called to a lorry had turned a corner, a big hire lorry, and he just he ran over an old lady crossing the road. Wheels were on the lady's head, so she was obviously dead. And we'd screened off the scene, and we were lifting the lorry and to recover the body. But they had a police van there with a sliding door open, and just sitting in the police van was this lady's handbag. And it was a classic old lady's handbag with a clip top, a stiff kind of cream-coloured handbag sort of thing, all our nans might have. Yeah. And it was splattered with blood. And just looking at that image, really, I just thought that, to me, that bothered me more than the mess that was underneath the wheels of this lorry, really, because the mess didn't mean anything to me. But looking at that handbag, you're thinking now, oh, my nan's got one like that, and all of a sudden it kind of, it makes it a bit more real, and it adds a bit of personality to the job you're dealing with. And that stayed with me really, because I just thought, that was pretty powerful, that. And I sort of banked that one. It didn't bother me. It just stuck in my mind, and I just thought, I'm going to bank that because there's a reason for that. And I think that was the start of my journey really about, dealing with stuff going forward. Because obviously, we're dealing with a lot of stuff. That's the first one that sticks out. And then, after that, we're dealing with all sorts, from fire fatalities really through to a lot of suicides, people jumping in front of tube trains, explosions and stuff in London. And the culture at the time really was pretty, macho, laugh it off, real black humour stuff. So it was just get round a mess table afterwards, and it was, to an outsider, it was outrageous, I suppose, and it was a very private thing. But the way that we dealt with it at the time was almost to kind of take the piss out of it and take the piss out of each other, really. And that was how it was dealt with at the time. And everyone got together straight after, for a cup of tea or whatever and discussed it. And that was the informal kind of, critical debrief, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's the interesting part, isn't it? That throughout history, if you get a group of people who've been through a traumatic experience, often sitting there talking about it, having a cup of tea, but making sort of dark humour, some comments about it is how you cope with it. Because you've got to go out and do this day in, day out. You can't spend your whole life in and out of rehab in that job. It's just not compatible. But have you seen that, I suppose, that way of coping and that dark humour, is that still there, or is that getting sort of weeded out? Is it kind of seen as non-PC these days? And
yeah, I think it is getting weeded out, really. A lot's happened, and I know we're going to touch on it, but I think the culture's really changed. The demographic of the fire service has really changed. You can imagine now, it's a lot more diverse workforce now than it was when I joined. And, there was a lot of ex-military, very male-dominated environment when I joined, roughy-tufty, and that's where you see people actually completely break because they're bottling stuff up. And then something will happen down the line as a trigger, and it will just send them into tilt. So all these things that were just boxed off and never really dealt with, are bottled up until one thing, and it's the strangest things. We had a bloke who he went to a particularly bad experience at a fire, and there were multiple fatalities there, and it obviously bothered him, and he boxed it off and put it away and not really talked about it, and he put it away for years. And then all of a sudden he had this complete meltdown while he was driving. And he had some counselling. And actually they triggered it back to, on the radio at the time, he had his meltdown, was a Dire Straits record. Now that's enough to send anyone into tilt. Mm-hmm. But it turned out that was the number one song, 10 years before when this incident happened. Yeah. And so 10 years later, this song came on the radio just out of the blue, and he just had a complete and utter breakdown.
Yes, quite common, that sound and smell association.
Yeah.
You don't realise something comes on, takes you straight back to a point in time. And, it's quite interesting, some of the PTSD stories we've been listening to recently, how other people have said that. So, obviously, in London, back in the 90s, was that IRA territory back then, or was that kind of weaning off on the site, on the bombs and what have you? Were they still getting on with that?
The tail end of the IRA stuff, really. It was kind of business as usual. The IRA thing was there, but, didn't really feature in my career. I was based at that time around sort of Brixton, Clapham and Lambeth, a proper network of tube trains. And come Christmas, we would always have, a peak in suicides and dealing with, with those sort of people all the time. There was one story, we had an old lady, actually. She jumped in front of she stabbed herself in the neck with a kitchen knife, a short kitchen knife, like a peeling knife, and then jumped in front of the tube. And she got it so wrong, really. The tube was over the top of her. She'd gone into the suicide pit, and we were walking up and down the platform looking for her, and we found her. And we had one of the crew shouting out, "Yeah, I found her. Yeah, she's dead. She's definitely dead. She's dead." And I think I had a bit of rank at this point. I'm going, the hearing being the last sense that you lose. I'm like, shut up, And you had this little voice, so I'm not dead, from under the tube. So we had to roll the tube back over her because she was down in the suicide pit. And in order to do that, you got to put the power back on. We put breakers down to stop the power current running through the tracks. And so you got to recover. You got to roll the tube back over. So you need the power back on. And the British Transport Police at that time they got an automatic commendation if they were under a train for a rollover.
Right.
And this was before body armour. We had this great big BTP copper with his white shirt on, insisting that he goes down there. And they handcuff the people so they can't grab the rail when you roll over, and take you with them sort of thing. So they handcuffed her. Someone's on her feet, someone's on her hands. One of my blokes said, could he go under for the experience? And you're like, well, okay, yeah, we'll go with that. And then this great big BTP copper decides he wants to go down there. And I'm saying, there's no need for you down there. We've got it covered. I'm going down. So he wedges himself down there, put his white T-shirt, white shirt on. We roll the train back over. She comes up, mate. Bear in mind, she'd stabbed herself in the neck and jumped in front of a tube. There was hardly a mark on her. It just was not her time.
Wow. She's giving it a good go as well.
Mate, she was at the wrong end of the platform, and they sort of nudged her in. But this big BTP copper got up, and I offered him a hand out to him. I said, do you want a hand getting out, mate? He said, no, I'm fine, because I wouldn't let him go there initially. And as he's trying to climb out, he fell back into the suicide pit on his back. And he was wedged like a turtle on his back in this pit, which is filthy, just screaming for help. And we were walking off by that point, So I don't know if he's still there. But and the thing about, you're dealing with death and stuff, but you deal with the most amazing near misses as well throughout your career. You're looking at things, you're just thinking, how have you survived this? I remember going to a car crash. This car had kind of, around, I don't know if you know, but around Tooting and Clapham, they've got these sort of, around the commons, they've got these concrete bollards with scaffold bars, effectively, as a railing. And this car was, I don't know if she'd had a blackout, she was heading for the bus stop. They all dived out of the way. She avoided the bus stop, and this tube sort of came through a bonnet, through a windscreen, under her arm and out of her door.
Wow.
And you just, not mark on her, and you're just thinking, what's your lottery numbers?
Yeah, not your time, mate.
No.
What's the suicide pit? You just sort of talk about that. Is that something that the trains put in to stop people jumping in front of them?
On the London Underground, you'll notice there's basically in the middle of the tube tracks, there's a dip, there's a pit. Yeah. So when you hit, it throws you down into the pit, so it rolls over you.
Oh, okay.
Not everyone's that lucky, but that's the suicide pit.
Got you. And do you get many people jumping off like the bridges in London? Is that quite a common thing?
Yes, yeah, we do. Off the Thames, bridges over the Thames, and the inland stuff's worse. We have my kind of area of responsibility is one of my references is technical rescue, and I put together a cadre of officers, technical rescue advisors. And we work with a hostage and crisis negotiation unit of the Met Police. And we had a bloke who was threatening to jump off a Westminster Bridge, and he's hanging onto the lamppost. And I'm sitting in this van with this chief superintendent who's head of the hostage and crisis negotiation unit. And he's on the phone at one point because he's got a family who have been taken hostage by pirates out in the Caribbean somewhere on a yacht.
Yeah.
So he's trying to deal with that negotiation, and he's kind of looking at his own officers dealing with this bloke threatening to jump. And he said to me, oh, he's going to go, this one. He's going to go. And I went, how do you know that? He said, I can just tell by his body language. And what they try and do is not make these people too comfortable. They want them to get cold. They want them to come down. They don't want to give them coats and all that. Yeah. So all these people are well-meaning. And he said he just needs a trigger. And we looked up at Big Ben, and he said he's going to go at 3:00. That'll be his trigger. And sure enough, when 3:00 struck, he jumped. But there were that many boats under him, the RNLI, us, the police, the harbour master, the Port of London Authority. I'm surprised the bloke hit the water, to be honest. But we fished him out, and again, not a mark on him. If that was me, mate, there'd be a pylon or something underneath it. I'd get it, But a lot of jumpers, a lot of near misses, and we're doing a lot of work actually, to try and work with partners in healthcare, really. To what do we do with these people? I went out to a bloke who hung himself, and it was his third suicide attempt that weekend. And I think we'd been to 2 of those, and you're just thinking, well, what are we doing about it? We go, we stop him, we come away, and then he just does it again somewhere else. Who do you hand him over to?
I think that's a wider problem, isn't it? Especially at the moment with the pandemic, that people are struggling with sort of personal circumstances, and mental health's obviously taken a big hit. And I was talking to a friend about it the other day who's he's got a personal member of his family who's struggling. He's a schizophrenic, but they can't get help for him because I think everyone's just so stretched, and so they need him to be committed. He's becoming violent, but they can't do anything. The next step may be that the guy tries to commit suicide, but it's very difficult. Where do you put these people who are struggling? Because resources are limited, especially at the moment.
It's really difficult, and we've had there's quite a high suicide rate in the fire service actually, and a member of my international search and rescue team, he committed suicide, and we were chatting to him, literally 2 days before. There was just no indication whatsoever. A married man, happily married, with a family. And we think it was an accumulation of kind of 5 or 6 problems, none of which seemed significant, in isolation, but together it was just too much for him.
Yeah. Everyone deals with stress different ways. But I think the big takeaway thing from that, we've been doing these podcasts with Pilgrim Bandits and a friend of ours, Matt Hellier, and it's just the NHS, their 5 sort of steps. And I think the NHS really set it out well about, sort of getting off social media and doing exercise, speaking to people, just these little things, small steps, learning new skills every day, doing something different, just maybe puts you in a better place. So you've obviously, you mentioned then about the international rescue, and I'm trying to sort of say that with a straight face because every time anyone ever says that, you think about Thunderbirds.
It is Thunderbirds, isn't it? So 9/11 happened. And then, it made us sit up, really, made England sit up and think, are we next? And that was a threat at the time. We were going to be next. And when 9/11 actually happened, I was on the QE2, mid-Atlantic, on my way to New York, right? And the plan was I was going to propose to my girlfriend. We were with her parents, and we were going to sail into New York. We were going to go to Tiffany's, get the engagement ring. 9/11 happened, and they diverted us to Boston. And then, whatever, we had to get the QE2 back. We'd stuffed our faces for a week, and the old DJ every night. And, looking forward to the flight back. And, of course, we had to get the QE2 back and eat all that food again. But that obviously changed the world. It changed our attitude, and a load of funding became available, more importantly for us. And we've been working on some collapse structure response stuff on a much sort of smaller scale, for gas explosions and stuff like that. And obviously this escalated us, way out of that. And the funding became available, and they sent us all to Texas to get trained in urban search and rescue, which is the acronym USAR. And that was amazing. You had all of these like firefighters on a plane thinking, this isn't real. This isn't going to happen. I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe it. Pinching ourselves. And when we had wheels up, we were thinking, you know what, this might happen. And we got out to Texas, and, there were big banners out there. I was on the first course, and it was like, the state of Texas welcomes the UK fire service. It was like fanfare stuff. And there were ice buckets full of beer on the tables. They said, look, in your rooms, we put these 2 adjoining hotel rooms as a bit of a breakout area. The fridge is full of beer. We'll keep it stocked up. Wow. Everyone's nodding and just nicking all the beers, putting them in. And they're like, no, there's loads more where that came from. Everyone's like, yeah. Just nicking everything. You don't have to nick it. It's yours. There's loads of... And that was just, the most amazing experience, you think, from anything we'd done. And they're just, what are the main risks here? Well, just be careful of the scorpions when you're sticking your hands in under rubble and stuff. Like, fuck off, But of course, it was all true. And we had a great time in Texas. That wasn't a London thing. That was a national thing. And the UK was setting up so that we had a similar response. And there were some wild plans going on at the time. We looked at Canary Wharf getting hit and what the evacuation plan might be. They cobbled together a plan to try and Kazovac everyone, I suppose, from the balcony of the top of Canary Wharf. Can you imagine everyone trying to make their way up to that little sort of walkway that goes round with winches on each corner? Crazy stuff, really. But of course, we didn't know. It was crazy. Yeah. 9/11 was crazy. But straight after that, there was an explosion in Glasgow, a plastics factory, the Mary Hill gas explosion, and there were 9 dead on it. And it was a new capability, really. This urban search and rescue. They needed teams to go and search for any survivors and recover any of the bodies. So we kind of we got mobilised and we went to Benson and we got choppered up in a Puma up to Glasgow. Did a nice bit of low-level stuff over the Lake District, doors open, and we landed up at Glasgow Airport, and we were up there for the best part of a week doing the body recoveries up there. And I suppose that was the kind of first time, really, we'd had that experience of a sort of mass fatality search job,
And this was a new capability that the British Fire Service had got. Yeah,
this was a kind of the first run out, really, of that capability, and there was one example, when you searched an area, there's sort of markings, you spray paint on it. And one of these senior officers from Glasgow was looking at spray paint and he thought we were tagging this site. And he just went ballistic because, you had Sky News and Eyes On everywhere from the flats around. He's like, what the fuck are they doing? Get them off, get them off. And then someone had to explain to him, no. This is what they're trained to do. Search an area, there's markings you put on it. And we were new to it. We did some stuff we probably shouldn't have done. We were trying to search desperately for bodies. And, there's an office block there. So you can imagine, you have people who work in the office who put cardigans or shoes under their desk, cardigans on their chairs, all of that's in a big pile. And you're finding a bit of clothing and tugging on it, kind of hoping that there's a body at the end of it. And there isn't. But, there were nine dead there. We went through that whole recovery process. And again, some near misses and some really unfortunate deaths there. And that was a bit of a baptism, I suppose, of the USAR capability.
Bit ironic, though, that your London Fire Brigade, historically, during the Blitz, Second World War, day in, day out, I suppose, back in the, 39 and 40, your whole, I suppose, ethos would have just been burning broken buildings, going in and rescuing people. Then there's been that skill fade over the subsequent 50-odd years, and then you're straight back in doing that again.
Yeah, when we went out to Texas, the pamphlets that they were giving us were drawings from wartime Blitz pamphlets that the auxiliary fire service was using at the time. And we were kind of going out there, like you say, we'd lost all of that. We didn't know how to shore up buildings. We didn't know how to, know where the safe paths were. And we were buying back our own information, really, from the Americans. It's ironic, really. The stuff still had, War Office stamps on it.
Yeah, that'd be some sort of new lease back they're doing with the government. 50 years would be paid off.
No doubt. Yeah.
So what sort of happened after that? Did you sort of take the sort of search and rescue to the next level?
Yeah, so after that, it was one of my references was search and rescue and developing that capability. And that's when we kind of joined the UK government's international search and rescue team, so it's ISAR, and that had been going really on a bit of goodwill for quite a few years for a lot of other services. London were in it really in the early days, back in the 80s. We kind of played with it a bit, and then we came out because there was an issue over pensions and what happens if you die overseas, who's going to pay your pension. So we kind of rejoined it, and it was a lot more structured by then. And the team had had a lot of shouts. There was a bit of a dry spell. And then they had kind of the New Zealand earthquake, they had the Japanese tsunami, and they went out to Haiti as well. And it was there, I think, Haiti, the team had some experiences there, really, which was a real eye-opener for them. So because of the huge numbers of fatalities in Haiti, it was just decimated.
Yeah.
it was kind of the agreement was when you find the dead, you bring them to the roadside and pile up the dead, and a dumper truck will come along and lift them and just lift them into the back, And so people are, these kind of rotting, smelly bodies. There was sort of no dignity, to it, and I think some of the teams struggled with that really, and they were that, and I think there was another experience where they were rescuing someone from a shopping centre, a girl who was survived, and this shopping centre had collapsed, and they were holding her hand and trying to sort of dig her out, and there'd be a bit of public disorder kicked off. I think the prison got damaged, all the prisoners escaped, and there was a bank robbery right next to where the team were working, and there was gunfire and everything going off, so they imposed a curfew. And they were trying to rescue this girl, and they had hands on, but they had to leave her because of the curfew. When they went back in the morning, she'd died. And I think, those sort of experiences really, it caused a lot of frustration with the team. And it made us look at how we're preparing our team for this. We're going out to mass fatality events, what we're really doing, rather than just relying on sort of fire service experience. This is a whole new ballgame. When you're going out to earthquakes, there's thousands and thousands of dead and injured. So what are we doing to prepare our people? And when we look to the military, we look to actually the Royal Marines had developed or coined the frame TRIM, which is a trauma risk management. And there was a guy, Major Cameron March, who had kind of developed this thing. And I think it's something that we all recognise anyway, this sort of, critical incident debrief, whatever you want to call it. But he kind of coined this process called TRIM. And he developed it to a point where Royal Marine units were coming back from their tours, and kind of it changed the culture within the Royal Marines, and they were just asking for it. Young soldiers just saying, "Right, come on, let's have a trim session." And it kind of starts with a group discussion, and then from there you weed out individuals who may need a bit more attention, shall we say? And the difference being when a military team comes back, they're still a unit. So they stay together. They still got their chain of command. Any paperwork that was initiated in theatre stays with them. With our team, because it's made up of different fire services, you all bomb burst back to your own fire service. So it's kind of how do we do that follow-up stuff? How do we adapt this to suit our needs? And I was responsible for adapting it and developing our own policy for TRIM, really off the back of the Haiti deployment.
I think Haiti, that was quite a big... There was quite a few dead there. I mean, how did that sit with what was the tsunami? Was that like 2004 or 5?
2004, wasn't it? Yeah, the big So you had three in one go, didn't you? You had the tsunami, which affected Thailand, Japan.
That's it, Thailand. Yeah.
You had the New Zealand earthquake.
Yeah.
And then you had Haiti. Kind of all on top of each other. Really.
It felt like we had a few years them.
That team hadn't deployed for like 8 years, and then all of a sudden they get 3 on a bounce.
Yeah, and so sort of after that, then Nepal, was that another one? There was a big earthquake there. That was quite a big one back then.
Yeah, so that was kind of our first run out really. So Nepal in 2015, 8.1 magnitude earthquake. There was almost 9,000 dead. 22,000 injured. A really, really big earthquake close to Kathmandu. And you can imagine there going out. So we deployed in a normal way. That all went quite well, actually. This end, not too bad. We need ministerial approval to deploy. And I think Parliament was in recess at that point. There was an election coming up. So it was a bit tricky to get hold of a minister to give us the nod. And eventually we got out anyway, and we were flying over Kathmandu, and the Yanks had filled up the runway, no surprise, with their Galaxies, They were offloading Ospreys from Galaxies, on the tarmac. And we chartered a 747 or whatever. It was quite a big plane, and we just couldn't get it down. So we were running out of fuel, and we had to divert to India to land. So you imagine the frustrations building already now.
Yeah.
We're in another country, watching it on the news, watching a very biased kind of Indian news network about how India is saving Nepal.
Yeah.
And we're screaming at the telly, we're staying in this nice hotel, just not wanting to be there. It was bizarre, really. And the next day we managed to get in, and real chaotic scenes. We turned up and we went straight to the British Embassy at Kathmandu, and actually they put us, our base of operations within the embassy compound. So we had security, and we had, it was kind of luxury, really. We were in tents, but we kind of had access to the ambassador's swimming pool and shower facility, changing room stuff. So we had, proper showers and stuff. So we got bedded in pretty quickly. The Gurkhas were there serving up some sort of food for us, and then they were using it as a rest centre. So they were bringing in all of the British people that had been on Everest and stuff, and bringing them back into the embassy to get patched up before they went back. And that was it, really. We were ready to hit the ground running, and everything was centred around Kathmandu, and that brought its own frustrations. So you can imagine it. The Nepalese government wanted to get Kathmandu up and running, obviously the capital, and Everest back up and running. That's what brings the money in, and that was the focus. And we went out to our first shout. They said, this place was devastated. There's bodies everywhere. Someone's done a recce. Coordination wasn't quite set up. Can you go? You'll be the first team there. And when we got there was a couple of NGOs, non-government organisations that kind of had just made their way there, not really linked into the coordination network. And they were kind of taking photos of each other at this place, and there was smelling and there was sort of, flesh everywhere and all the rest of it. Within kind of minutes of being there, we gripped the owner, the local copper and the local military commander. And we had established that actually it was a butcher's market that had collapsed.
Right.
All that flesh everywhere and the flies and all that was just animal
the
flesh,
cow.
Yeah. So there was kind of, I think there were 3 people dead in there, that we'd already identified. And we just said, look, we're out of here, you crack on, you take photos of each other, because there's no TV obviously now. So we got a crowd of around 2,000 people watching us, do all this. So we just bugged out of there, went back, and we were sort of screaming really for some more jobs. And I suppose the frustration was building because we had been picking up from the military that out in the villages, people had been really smashed to bits, and it was a bit of a desperation to get out to the villages. And we had we got out eventually, and there was we had a helicopter booked. Helicopters are really hard to come by. The press were grabbing helicopters because they had the big bucks, to get the shots. And we weren't standing a chance. And we had a sort of fixer with us from Department for International Development, it was then. And he'd secured us his helicopter, which was basically a sightseeing helicopter. So I did the manifest ready to go. The helicopter's coming in 40 minutes, sent off the manifest for the first 5 loads or whatever. And it got diverted by the Prime Minister, allegedly, to pick up a British family that were on Everest that kind of weren't injured. It was kind of a good news story, or that's how it was being told to us, on the run up to the election. So you got blokes spitting feathers now, knowing there's this death and devastation out in the hills, in the villages, but your only mode of transport has been nicked for a good news story. Yeah,
typical, isn't it? That clash with the politicians, they'll always see a good news story and it would trump everything else. But I mean, that's an amazing achievement, though, isn't it, for the blokes? I mean, to come back from there to obviously you've proven the theory behind the international search and rescue, the coordination, and you can always improve on different things, I'm sure. But generally, you've gone out there, you've gone to do a job, you've achieved that, you've helped save lives. I mean, it's something to be very proud of.
Yeah, and we did some really good work out there. There was the main hospital in Kathmandu was compromised by a dangerous structure. They pulled the beds out into the car park, and our team managed to get and secure the clock tower on top that was kind of threatening the entrance. With some improvised systems, got the hospital up and running, got 4 theatres up and running within the hospital. Mega achievement. Got a load of the villages, and getting aid from Médecins Sans Frontières, delivering food and water and shelter out to these villages that we got to. So kind of some mega achievements, I was chuffed to bits really. I thought we'd really made a big impact. And we came home, we were kind of full of it, really. We were kind of sick of it, but, I thought we'd done a decent job. And then I got a team together to do the trim intervention. And that was really when it kind of hit me. that actually people hadn't had the same experience as me. Mm. So I thought, done a great job. Look at what we've achieved, And then it was only going through that trim process and talking to the team individually, getting them to tell their story. Some of them had a real horrendous time out there. And, as a team leader, I was gutted that I hadn't picked up on some of this. Mm. And this is about people's perception of their experience. One example of that, we're on these hillsides doing our needs assessments in the villages. And one of the villages we went to had a kind of massive landslide. It was about a mile wide. And this mile, wide bit of hillside had just, fallen down in one of the aftershocks and wiped out an entire village. So you've got hundreds of people buried, never, ever, ever to be found again down the bottom of a ravine. We got lifted from an adjacent village, and we were in the air when there was another big aftershock. And another part of my team were on the opposite hillside across from the ravine, staring at this landslide when the aftershock hit. And one of them, kind of got it in his head, shit, if this happens to us, if we lose, if they're part of that landslide, no one would ever find them, ever.
Yeah.
They'd be buried under, millions of tons of earth, So once that got in his head, that was a worm. That was in his head now. He was vulnerable now, and he was just not, he wasn't thinking straight from that moment after, really.
Yeah, because that's why he's worried about his own safety, and he's just sort of niggling in the back of his mind.
Yeah, I think he just felt vulnerable for the first time. We had another bloke who was about to retire, and that was why I selected him for the team, because he was, it was his last chance, I suppose. And he had it in his mind a bit of a money shot that he would be lifting the baby out of the rubble, with all the press around. That's what we do. Because we didn't do much of that stuff. We were doing the needs assessment and actually saving hundreds of lives rather than just one. He never got it out of his system. So he was battling with this is as good as it gets. My life's over because I'm retiring. And he never got this thing out of his system. And, talking to mates we know, when they go out on tour, they've got the same sort of picture in their mind. They've got this thing that they want to achieve. They want to kill all the baddies, be the last man standing, And when they don't get out of their system, they don't feel they've achieved anything.
Yeah.
And so we had all that to deal with when we got back. And I started hearing these things, and I was thinking, shit, I had no idea of this. I know that these people were struggling out there, and we were laughing and joking, and I had no idea what was going on with them.
So how did that sort of resolve itself? Is it through the trim sessions? And
yeah, so we had trim, and some went on to counselling. And for me, it was just a massive lesson learned, really. One to take forward is don't assume everyone's, seeing things the way you do. Not everyone's got the same experience. And it was the triggers again. It was back to that handbag thing. It was the triggers that different things are different triggers for people, that affect them. And whilst, we're oblivious to it, we had another guy working on the hospital job, and he was detached from our team, working with some other people. He was a really good climber. And he said he felt really lonely and isolated, that we'd abandoned him and we'd all gone off to the villages, and that was bothering him, that he felt, he was with people he knew, but even he felt vulnerable and lonely, just these weird things. I'm like, why didn't you tell me this when we were out there?
Some people don't talk. But then you sort of came home, and obviously I think one of the biggest, certainly a controversial subject in the last few years is something most people have heard of, is the Grenfell fire. I mean, before Grenfell was, with the fire, I doubt many people had heard of this place, but now it's kind of probably etched on the minds of everyone in this country.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I was on duty the night of the Grenfell Tower fire. I was mobilised to it when the incident commander over there, gave the message to what we call make pumps 20. That's when he'd asked for 20 fire engines. And that's mega. That's significant. We ended up being 40, but you can imagine, to ask for 20 fire engines at something, is kind of unusual, really. And so normal routine, really. My pager went off. Normally my wife doesn't stir. I put my radio on, and I'm hearing all these messages from our control, quite calm, but about these kind of, survivors, fire survival guidance, people trapped in their flats. And it just didn't add up, because the numbers that they were saying were here, there, and everywhere. And I thought, hang on, normally it's all centered around the fire, but these numbers were kind of here, there, and everywhere. And it was all very calm, but really unusual, And my wife said, what's going on? She doesn't normally stir. And I said, I don't know. I said, but it doesn't sound good, 20 pump fire, so quickly, and all of these fire survival guidance calls. So I went to it, and, as I approached, got my gear on, and I'm sort of running towards their command unit, and I can see this block of flats in front of me, and there's a light on two sides. The time I got there, kind of, I suppose the east and the south side were completely alight.
How big is it? I mean, sort of just people that are listening that don't necessarily know.
Yeah, 23 floors. So decent, a big tower block with difficult access to get vehicles that close to it.
A lot of people living there. Sort of quite a few flats in there.
Loads of flats in there. I mean, at the time, we were all thinking, is this like scaffold netting? Because you get that quite a lot. You get a building scaffolded and the netting catches fire. It looks, kind of spectacular, for want of a better word, but actually just burns away to nothing. Yeah. And that's what it looked like. You wouldn't have dreamt that this building would be on fire to that extent. And I reported to the command unit, and the bloke who was in charge at that time, he just said, right, Dave, with your kind of collapsed structure background, I'm making you the senior safety officer for the incident. Now, bearing in mind, you've got firefighters absolutely risking their lives here, doing some proper improvised shit that they shouldn't have been doing, and I'm senior safety advisor for this. And he's just saying, tell me if this building's going to stay up. Everyone had these images of the Twin Towers, with this kind of collapse thing. And it was a mega chaotic kind of effort, really. And it was my main job was liaising with everyone that's in the building and outside the building, and trying to convince the ultimate incident commander, Andy Rose, now a commissioner, convince him that actually it was safe to carry on. That we could carry on doing this. You've got burning debris falling down everywhere, threatening everyone around the outside. You've got faces at windows. We're trying to pump people into this building. I'm getting structural engineers' advice to say, what's the fire protection for this building? How's it built? What impact is this furnace going to have on the structure? And all of this is going on, and we're having some serious conversations that night as a command team. It gets to the point where we're saying, look, how many firefighters are we prepared to lose before we stop?
That's a crazy conversation to be having.
Proper, difficult conversations. And come the inquiry, and we've all given evidence at the inquiry, we're kind of like, do we mention that? And Andy Rose, saying, yeah, of course we mention that, because that's the kind of reality. When you're in that command position, that's the stuff you've got to think about. You've got to think about public expectation, the right to life as well, the Human Rights Act. And our people have got a right to life as much as the people in there, and it's that dilemma, really, of the expectation for us to go and do our bit and risk our lives to save others, and we always will. We will risk a lot to save life. And we had a crew up on a walkway next to it, and there's a reports of people jumping from the tower, and that's public knowledge. And I kind of went up, and I kept pulling this crew back. They were getting too close to the kind of building, all this burning debris showering down on them. I kept pulling them back, and they're kind of doing their best to keep this. There was someone waving a towel out the window, and they were doing their best to keep this bloke alive, and that ultimately saved his life. Aiming these big sort of, water jets as high as they could possibly get them. And one of the residents had jumped, and I went forward to see if, I didn't know if his family would follow. So you've had this person jump, the crews were working on him, and I thought, well, I'll just go forward just that bit further, just to see, to try and, I don't want anyone else to jump. It was that dilemma of certain death. If you stay, you're dead. You take your chances of jumping. And I was hugging the building going round, and as I stepped forward, this bit of burning debris almost took my nose off. I had my helmet on, but this kind of 7-foot bit of the building cladding just came down and crashed at my feet. And I heard the crew just shouting out, "Fuck!" like this, and I kind of hugged the building back round and popped my head out. I went, that was close. And they were like, fuck, we thought you were dead, you know. And I've got senior safety written on my back here, and I'm nearly getting wiped out myself at this building.
But I mean, this is an evolving situation, though, isn't it? I mean, it's nothing like you've ever been to.
It was just like that all night. You know, it was relentless the whole night. And you know, I've got to say, you know, we've been really scrutinised for what we did on the night. But, you know, took the individuals themselves, you know, I swear they couldn't have done any more than they did. I had to go up, and Andy Rowe was giving some kind of motivational, you know, speeches, grabbing everyone, saying, look, I'm expecting the world of you here. I'm expecting you to do things I'd never normally ask you. You've got crews going up, you know, 4, 5, 6 floors above where they've got water to protect themselves, into fire, to do their best to save us. You know, they've got armfuls of people to try and bring them out of this building. And, you know, I had that talk with the junior officers up on this grassy bit, and just said, like, get all the junior officers in. I'm saying, listen, everyone's been in there once, you know, it's not going to be the same. We can ask them to go back in 2, maybe 3 times, change their cylinders, get back in there, but it's going to be worse than they remember it. You only normally go in somewhere once, you know, and so can you just brief them and just prepare them that actually it's, you know, it's going to be even worse, and they might not get to do the job they're given, because if you know, a single staircase, they're handballing people down this staircase. You know, it's just that frustration of the crews, really, of wanting to do more. They've got arms full of people. They're trying to get out. They're feeling hands slip off their shoulders, you know, and that dilemma of, I've got children in my arms. Do I carry on going, or do I go back for the adult that's slipped off my shoulder? And that was relentless. You know, it was non-stop throughout the night.
That's extreme heat that they're working in there. I mean, they've got their breathing apparatus on. They're having to climb up multiple stories. They haven't got the protection behind them. So I think every single bloke that was there on that night, deserves a huge pat on the back. And some of the scrutiny and the things you see in the press about it, I mean, it's very easy, you know, with hindsight, for people to sit there and say, you could have done this, you could have done that. But I don't think you could have done any more on the night. And you know, I think, you went over and beyond, really, what you expected to do.
Well, you know, I know they did, you know, and we are very proud of the actions of our firefighters on the night. You know, take away the politics and take away the procedures and kind of stuff. We broke every rule there was to break that night. You know, and when you're a senior safety officer, you know, it's not a place to be where everyone's breaking every rule. You know, you're trying to keep on top of things. You know, so anyway, that went on, and I left there at about 11:30 in the morning. So I've been there for about 10 hours. You know, I came home completely smashed to bits. Put the news on, you know, to see where we got to. Really, got my head down for a bit, and then I got a phone call from my boss and one of my colleagues in the police disaster victim identification teams. And they said, look, can you meet us there at 7:00 the next morning? Because we want to start the process of the body recovery. They were kind of on top of the fire by then. So, you know, having just that short time away, I was back in a kind of different role, back in my sort of search and rescue role now, to lead the body recovery for you know, those poor souls that were left in the building.
Yeah, I mean, that must have been crazy. I mean, is there anything like that in your whole career that you've ever been similar to that?
No, nothing like that. Not on those numbers, you know. And it was just, you know, it was relentless. We were there for 2 weeks, and you know, we had some structural issues with the building as well, and people were kind of whipping that up a bit, you know. And you can imagine, you would have seen the, you know, I'm not going to say anything, you know, that's kind of not really in the public domain, but you would have seen the extent of the devastation in these concrete flats, you know, completely 100% devastated. And you know, I met with the police. We went straight to the top of the tower. I'm looking at the structural integrity of the building. They're looking for bodies, you know, and they're seeing things that I don't recognise. They're going, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, and you're like, what, where? You know, just in piles of ashes and debris. And they're picking stuff out. And of course, that's what they're trained to do. You know, we're kind of doing a rough count, and then fires are breaking out below us. We need to get out again till they're put out. And then it was a really hot time of year anyway, but you imagine that furnace has just been burning. It was so hot in there, and you know, we had to then come up with a plan saying, okay, how's the building? Is it going to stay up? You know, is it going to be fractured just to the intensity of the heat? And you know, there were some issues in there, and I think we were very lucky, really, and we were able to do that systematic body recovery and bring some dignity, really, to the families, you know, that had suffered the worst fate. And I had my search team with us, and you know, we recalled one of the team, and it was the watch that were actually on duty the night of the fire. So now I'm asking them to come back, having had that traumatic experience of the fire. I'm asking them to come back in now in the cold light of day, without the adrenaline flowing, with the lights on, effectively, you know, with no smoke, and kind of see the devastation that had been caused.
I mean, that must have been horrendous. And I think, obviously, the aftermath of something like that, you touched on it earlier about when we were talking about the culture within the fire brigade and, you know, talking about things and how actually maybe it's not as good as it once was, or there's room for improvement. You just had 40-odd fire engines there, God knows how many fire officers there. You know, they've all just seen something pretty horrendous, much more than they would see on a usual sort of daily basis. So how did that, you know, was any policies put in place to help people or talk about it?
The commissioner we had at the time, we had a female commissioner, Danny Cotton, and she really did a lot to change the culture, and she did a lot to support firefighters after Grenfell. And you think about the firefighters that responded to Grenfell, they had a kind of snapshot of their time there. You know, I think with the recovery teams, you know, they were going back there day after day after day. They had this repeated, they had the much wider view of what was going on. And so I thought it was important that we follow that kind of trim process again with them. And again, that brought out all sorts of, you know, problems with the team. And you know, little things that given people those triggers that we spoke about earlier, and they related it to their own family or to something in their own life that made it real for them rather than just kind of a job, you know. And, you know, teams, I think, well, we all had counselling at some point, but, you know, some of the teams, some of the individuals in my team, you know, were having counselling for a long, long time after that. To you know, they were waking up at night. They were, you know, there were people at the foot of their bed. This sort of stuff that was breaking their kind of sleeping routine. Then that builds a new sleeping routine, and then you're wondering why you're waking up at 3:00 every morning, you know. And they were struggling to come to terms with literally what they had seen. And I kind of suppose my way of dealing with it, and you know, it worked for me. I took time out really when I was lying in bed at night, but I took time out to kind of pick off each individual that I could remember, and I vividly remember them still, you know, but actually take the first one and just go through it in my mind, look at it, process it, think about it, and then put it away, and then move on to the next one and think about that. And, you know, it got difficult. We had entire families kind of huddled together. You know that they'd, you know, huddled together to die. There's a lot to take in, really. And that was my way of dealing with it, is just picking off each individual one and just processing it. And I shared that with the team, you know, and it was helpful to some of them. But for others, they'd just gone off on a tangent, and it was just the weirdest things that they were struggling with, you know. Animals in the stairwell, because everyone knows that animals get out quick. Well, you know, they weren't. So it kind of shows how it was in there.
It's ferocious. And I think that's one of the interesting sort of things, is that we were talking earlier about, I suppose, as part of the training, giving you the resources and teaching you the coping mechanisms about some of the things that you might end up seeing in your career. So this is, you know, how you deal with it and having it up front. But I suppose taking it a few steps further, as part of the recruitment process, you know, rather than all these sort of great advertising posts, you know, like in the military, you get a picture, you know, they're putting these films on about people skiing down a mountain and jumping out of planes. Perhaps they should sort of show some of the darker side of the job. You know, the same with the fire brigade. It's not all, you know, I suppose, the cliche climbing the ladder and rescuing a cat out of a tree. It's the horrible stuff, and people being run over, jumping in front of trains, the fires and everything. So people, I suppose, emotionally, you're never going to know you're ready until you actually face that challenge in reality. But you might get a number of people who think, no, this isn't for me, or it deters the...
Sorry, mate. Yeah, I think that's really important. I mean, I do it now. I mean, the position I'm in now, I had one this morning. I have to do the kind of welcome on day one of, you know, the new cohort of recruits that come in. So this morning I've got, you know, 10 brand new, they haven't even got their uniform yet, day one in the fire service. You know, I'm the first person they see in a uniform. And and I try and bring it to life without scaring them off. I'm absolutely adamant that we don't lose sight of that, because a lot of the focus is on community safety, and it is on helping the community, and that is a big part of our job. But we can't lose sight of kind of the shitty end of the stick as well. That is the reality of our job. We hope something like Grenfell never happens again, but kind of you need to be prepared for that, because that's what you're joining. I hope you don't see it in your career when you're coming through, but you need to start thinking about, actually, can you deal with that?
Yeah.
Can you deal with the death, the suicide stuff? It's never going to be on any poster, but I don't think we should shy away from it either. And I think we have in the past. I think we haven't really mentioned it. I think at times we even gave people the option to leave a lecture, if there was some kind of gory photos in it. And that caused us, a couple of problems. So I think we need to be upfront with people, and we need to say, this is your contract, this is what you're signing up for. And if we're upfront from the start, people can be as prepared as they can be. I don't think they should do what I did and go off to postmortems, particularly. But I did it, and it stood me in good stead, really. And I like to keep that bit alive. And I did it only this morning with a new cohort of recruits to say, you're joining a great career. It's really tight, great teamwork. You're going to do a load of great stuff at the centre of our community, helping. I'm talking about the vaccination stuff we're doing at the moment, the COVID, all of that good stuff. And I'm saying, but let's not lose sight. Actually, times get tough, and you've got to talk about it, and you've got to share those experiences. And the culture, I think, has changed now. We sort of embrace this trim. And I think Danny Cotton, a previous commissioner, was really responsible for changing that kind of roughy-tufty image. She was hugging firefighters at Grenfell, and you got grown men breaking down in front of her. And I think she did a lot actually to change the culture of our service, and and say it is all right. It's okay not to be okay. It's a cliche thing, isn't it? But and we're lucky that we've got the counselling and support networks that we've got in the service. But it's kind of it's that one that catches you out, I think, and that's my message is, you box this up and then something down the line just catches you out, catches you off guard and brings it all out, and I suppose really I've tried to share my experiences with my own team and use the tools I've got to recognise that not everyone sees the same thing as you. So whilst you might be comfortable with it, the person sitting next to you actually might be really struggling with it, and it's just encouraging people to open up and throw away that roughy tufty image, because it'll just come back and haunt you another time.
Yeah, it will. People got to talk. I think that's always the first step. So sort of taking it away from the fire brigade, and then we'll start sort of closing down the podcast. I suppose one of the big takeaways for you for 2020 will be your award. So you got your MBE in the Queen's, but is it the birthday honours, Christmas honours?
Yeah, I got it in the birthday honours, yeah. It was kind of off the back of capacity building work we've been doing in 6 different countries, going out training their rescue teams, to be more prepared. So they're first responders. We this has been a bit of a blocker for us with no air travel, but done a lot of work in the last few years of going out and sharing our expertise overseas. And then when COVID came, I thought we had a certain skill set that we could lend to support our partners, really. So we had at a peak, we had 400 people driving ambulances, assisting paramedics. We had 100 firefighters that were responsible for responding to deaths in the community and kind of, in a dignified way, doing that body recovery stuff. And now we're embarking on the sort of vaccination thing, and kind of that. I was responsible for that project. We called it Operation Braidwood. And that kind of, I suppose, got picked up as well. So that was the icing on the cake, really. And that's what got us noticed, I suppose, for the award.
Oh, well done.
Yeah, thanks, mate. I mean, it is cliche, isn't it? But it is one for the team. It really is. There were 600 people involved in Operation Braidwood. I know, I was driving it, and I asked for it, to be honest, at the start, because I knew we were capable of doing it. And we've had a few more people from the team have been picked up with BEMs, actually, in the New Year's honours.
That's good.
Yeah, it is good. It is good. We're notoriously shit at sending people up for awards, actually, in the fire service. So it's kind of nice, and hopefully now we can kind of change that.
I think you got picked up at the same time. A friend of ours, Mark Ormerod, he's a Marine. He came off the same list. But are you going to go up to the palace for that one?
Yes, yeah. I haven't had a date confirmed yet. You know, I imagine they got a bit of a backlog now, but yeah, we're just waiting out, mate. The missus ready for buy a new hat, depending on what time of the year we're going, you know. But yeah, it's nice, isn't it? You know, it's great. I can get christened at St Paul's now. I've never been christened because we was born in Hong Kong, and we haven't actually had my son christened. So we're going to arrange our christening at St Paul's Cathedral. So
I never knew that. Is that a perk? Is it?
That's a perk from it. Yeah, you got the Empire Chapel down in the crypt of St Paul's. So yeah, we're going to go there. I can get married there. Up to my grandchildren can get married in St Paul's. So
that's brilliant. That's something to sort of shout about. A little bit of pub trivia.
Yeah, exactly, mate.
And so on to the last things. One of the things we ask all the guests on the show, we sort of say, you know, if you've got your grab bag by the front door, what 3 items would you have in that? So what's personal to yourself that you think, right, that is my go-to, that's got to be in my bag if I'm going to go on a shout now? Spring it on you.
Yeah, cheers for that. Mate, it's my mobile phone, isn't it? My mobile phone's my life, really. And that's everything you need, isn't it? Your camera, your comms, your notepad and everything. So my mobile phone, mate, a decent pair of headphones so you can lock yourself away and listen to some music. And a bag of Haribo. Bit of Haribo. Bit of Morello to share amongst the team. When the chips are down, mate, you pull that bag out and give it out to the team. Yeah, the rest you can make do, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Well, look, I think anyone that listens to this tonight, or whatever they listen to it time of the day, they're going to have a different journey, which is nice. You know, we're going off on sort of slightly different tangents now. I think what you've just said has been very sort of open. It's an honest, been from the heart, and your personal sort of journey. I've really enjoyed hearing that, and I hope everyone else has too. So, you know, just want to say, you know, good luck for the future and everything else that you do with the brigade and family and moving forward. And thanks for coming on and sharing your story.
Yeah, no, thanks, Adam. It was good to talk to you. And I look forward to hearing more of your podcasts.
Thank you. That was David O'Neill MBE, London Fire Brigade, and he's just taken us on his journey, and what a journey that was. For everyone that's listening, hope you enjoyed that. If you've got any messages, any feedback, please feel free to DM them to us on Facebook, on Instagram. If you're listening to this through iTunes, on iPods and what have you, then you can like the show, leave a message, and that helps get us up the ranks. If you could obviously share the love, tell your friends and everyone about the show. We want to push it out there. We've got some great new guests coming up, so the more people that hear it, the better. So if you want to hear more journeys like David, or we've got Dean Stock coming up, and we've got a number of other SAS, SBS, Fire Brigade, police, you know, some people with some true adventures, some explorers. They're all coming up in the next couple of weeks and months ahead. So if you don't like or share or don't follow us, then you won't get to hear the fun. But for now, that's another episode of Another Man's Shoes, and thanks for listening.